what is that like too, by the way, with living and working at Green Gulch or living and working at Tassajara, where you are definitely for Tassajara, right? You're like very much away from everybody else. And I don't know how quickly contractors could come out. I don't know how quickly handy people can come out. And to have a community that has to be able to address issues like maintenance issues or whatever it is, on the fly or relatively quickly. Like, what is that like within your community when you're doing it?
Um, well, I think it based partially there would self-select the people who were really had the capacity to kind of like engage with like Tassar is completely independent. Like all systems are self-contained. Like we have generators, solar power, we have our own inverters and batteries, we had our own wells. It has no, it has it's completely self-contained. And so it got increasingly complicated every year. Like because partially because like when I first got there, it was just like a generator with no inverter system, I think. And so that just meant like when the generator was on, we had electricity. When they turned it off, all the lights just went out. And which it happened every night. And we had a lot of kerosene lamps and stuff, and so we'd live with just kerosene lamps in darkness. And but eventually we had battery systems, and then we started getting solar arrays, and then the solar arrays make that there's some complex electronics there with the battery systems and the generator. And yeah,
Wow.
so the plant manager, that it was kind of this staff position that became, had to learn more and more. At that actually, at times they, if there wasn't someone in the community, they would actually try to hire. We'd have to hire somebody who was willing basically to live in the middle of the wilderness, you know, off the grid and with a Zen community. And but yeah, but Sarah was the head of the plant at Tassajara for about a year, and
Wow.
and so she knew all those systems. And a contractor, it would take them 2 hours to arrive at Tassajara. So um and so we it was a lot of hours to get a repair. So we did almost all our own repairs. Only
Wow.
major stuff would we call someone in. And so Sarah did a lot of plumbing.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of plumbing. And she actually wrote a poem about plumbing. It's really great.
Oh, nice.
A Zen
Oh,
poem about plumbing and like all these koans that she found in plumbing terminology.
well, yeah, because I was gonna say, like, I feel like there's the practice experience of the learning of the task in preparation for addressing it. There's the doing of the task and the success or failures of it. And there's also the practice element maybe of having as a community to deal with whether or not something was patched up properly or not, or all of that. So was that kind of ingrained into the experience, did you feel like?
I definitely thought it was part of it. Yeah, and certainly in my earlier years, like the Zendo heating was precarious. So we had a hot water heating system in the Zendo, and problems would happen. And so
Yeah.
we would it so sometimes the Zendo is really cold.
Wow.
And it was sort of like, well, we knew people were trying to fix it.
Yeah. Right, right.
And yeah, and I think there might have, anyway, kind of, various things would go wrong that they could be very inconvenient, but overall, actually, it felt like it was great to be like, oh, if the generator breaks, like we really don't have any power, and like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get through the day?
Yeah.
And yeah, actually, have being able to repair a diesel generator, that was one of the skills of the plant manager.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
And was there a because I know that when blackouts kind of roll through my neighborhood or throughout my life, there is this disruptive nature to it, but there's also this like kind of romance that happens too, where it's like, oh, now we have to be by candlelight or now we have to be by flashlight
yeah.
and make our own fun or make our own whatever it is. Did it feel like that when the lights went out or the plumbing stopped working? Well, maybe not the plumbing. Well, who knows? But was there like a romantic element to the rustic nature of it, or the all of a sudden we're pared down to our basics and fundamentals, and now we're at the whim of nature. Was there something to that that felt kind of interesting?
I appreciated it. Yeah, I mean, I felt like part of our living at Tassajara was living with the elements. Like it's pretty intimate. Like my cabins for most of my time there was no cooling or heating. So it was just like if it was hot, it was hot, and if it was cold, like and and a cold winter at Tassajara would get down in the 20s, and we you'd it would be really cold in our rooms. And then you go and like and then you go and all you have is cold water to like wash with in the morning, and so you'd be washing with the cold water and the 20 degrees, and it was it felt like, oh, this is maybe a little closer to how Dogen lived or something. Like people have lived like this for thousands of years, and we were, it wasn't this kind of this wilderness. Tassajara is in the middle of the Los Padres National Forest. There's like no other civilization around for basically 5 miles in any direction. And
Wow.
that was such a treasure. That was like just so wonderful, you know.
I'd imagine it's maybe in a dark sky territory or something like that, where you can see a bunch of stars, or you can see
Oh
like
yeah.
very clear. Yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, no,
yeah.
super clear. And there was one winter where it got down in the teens, and then the plumbing froze, and that became an inconvenient thing.
Yeah,
Where like you couldn't flush,
right.
and there was pretty hard to find running water. But it didn't last. It lasted maybe a week, but then a lot of pipes broke. Anyway, maybe it went on for more than a week. But that was kind of that probably felt inconvenient and challenging,
Yeah, yeah,
and a lot of work for the maintenance people. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. And but I guess it's a testament to everyone's commitment to making things work and learning things on the fly or whatever it is, but also recognizing that things can really just change like so quickly. Like a burst pipe, I mean that could really set you back for some time and disrupt, you know, plumbing and all that kind of stuff is a very sensitive key item for our modern tastes.
Yeah.
Wow. And then have you since having left Tassajara, have you kind of kept that cold shower is okay with me kind of thing, or like wilderness interest and things like that, like being connected in that way? Does that kind of remained a little bit for you?
Well, I think for Sarah and I, we have this value on the kind of the nourishment of wilderness, and so so living in Brooklyn, but we're close to Prospect Park. Yeah, we go into that park for daily nourishment,
Nice.
and if I've been out in the city and doing all sorts of stuff, and then as soon as I come back to a place where there's lots of trees, my breathing changes. I think I feel something else happening in my body as soon as I'm with the trees.
And that's not even a thing that you intend, like it's not an intention, it just you notice it happen.
Yeah, I just notice it happen. Yeah.
Wow.
That I can like I just something relaxes or something feels different.
Yeah.
Get back with some trees. After being with like buildings and cars and streets and sidewalks for
Yeah.
miles and miles. I do a lot
Lot,
of walking. So I'm walking
yeah.
in the city and I get back to the park, and it's great.
A lot a
But I
lot of
appreciate it.
a lot of hard surfaces and a lot of right angles in city life. And the I'm glad that you live near and you get to experience a lot of that nature-based thing that nourishes you back to, especially as you come home or as you exit home, it kind of like gives you a little lift.
Yeah.
um wow. And
And but even there is a way in which like all the peoples everywhere, in a big city, it's all kind of wilderness. It has a kind of wilderness quality to it.
oh yeah, yeah, the
And
subway.
so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
The
subways. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
it can be quite wild, and yeah, you do have to kind of be on your toes for various things of it. But also, it can be kind of fun too. Just the just general. I used to live in New York for some time, and uh, I remember how you kind of feel like a gopher, or you feel like you feel like something because you spend a lot of time underground, and it's its own kind of like ecosystem that when you're down there, there are all these tunnels and routes and things that become secondhand nature, or that become almost instinctive later on. But uh, you adapt to a new nature of life, or new way of life.
Yeah.
Has that been a good transition for you since you came from Sebastopol? Is that right, where you were based
Yeah, from
before?
Sebastopol, yeah, which is kind of semi-rural. I think Sarah and I, we're really ready for this. So yeah, we're totally appreciating Brooklyn.
Nice.
I think Sarah's nourished by the park like I am. Sarah feels a little more need to like get out to kind of maybe bigger wilderness or bigger woods. And our son also, I think he also gets nourished by actually like, kind of getting out of the city completely.
Yeah.
I don't feel as much of a need. I kind of grew up in this. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, and so maybe because that's where I grew up, I don't feel a need so much to get out of the city.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
Just having a little breaths here and there of green space or whatever it is can help you get you
yeah,
by. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I feel that way too. New York was a kind of a hard city for me to leave because there's so much energy in it, and it can be kind of intoxicating in its own way, and in a good way, I guess. And you you find that there's a lot of adventure to be had
yeah.
walking around the streets of New York and everything. So leaving it and being around space could almost feel like daunting for me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Nope, but as you go upstate though, I mean Poughkeepsie and things like Dia Beacon. Have you ever been up to Dia Beacon before?
I have not been up to Sarah went, but I have not been up there.
Yeah, so, the Storm King or something like that is up there, and it.
We've been to Storm King.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. I didn't know where I was town wise, but we
Oh,
went to
got it.
Storm King on our way back from a little trip in April, and we loved it.
Oh,
Like
nice.
huge outdoor naturally placed, sculptures and
Yeah,
yeah.
I particularly like. There's an artist, Andy Goldsworthy. Are you familiar
Oh
with
yeah,
Andy Goldsworthy?
yeah,
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 yeah. I I love I love his approach to things like they thankfully there's photography for it, but there just momentary natural things
yeah,
that he places for himself, or like a leaf bridge over a pond, and gets the right shot before it all kind of collapses.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and is art something that you surround yourself with and also get nourished from in general, or like in a practice sense?
Um, I think some, like certainly Sarah and I loved going there, and I've always felt like kind of empowered in terms of like to make art is something I've always felt like, well, I mean, it's not like, it's not for museums, it's just for me and my family, but and so we all like in our family we like write poems and we make little drawings and we make a lot of music and
Oh, wow.
especially my daughter and then I, and so play a lot of piano and I mostly just make stuff up. I mostly just improvise.
Wow.
And
It is well, it's really amazing that you as a family all kind of have a creative element to your family expression or family unit itself. It sounds like it has like all, and it ranges from literature to music to just about everything, it sounds like.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sarah and I are both. I think we both were, yeah, like really into like making stuff. Like and and then our daughter and our son are well, my our daughter went through Waldorf education through eighth grade. Our son has just finished sixth grade.
Oh,
So that Waldorf just integrates a ton of art, artistic
yeah.
expression and musical expression into the whole approach to education. And
Or
so yeah,
yeah. Our kid is going to be soon into the kindergarten age, and we've taken a look at a Waldorf school. It's really amazing what they do, and to build their students' confidences with sewing, or with a lot of hands-on
yeah.
student-led projects and things like that. Did that kind of reflect a lot of the values that you like to have at home and various things like that?
Yeah, I think the thing that attracted us to Waldorf was the kind of the big picture was just like the child's a whole being. and a kind of spiritual being. So the teachers would actually hold the children as spiritual, holistic humans. And there's kind of a practice, I think Waldorf teachers do this, of like every night kind of holding each child in their classroom as a kind of spiritual being and kind of just meditating on like their destiny and kind of just giving a little space for that.
Wow.
And that just felt, yeah, really like, oh, this is the kind of education, the environment that we want to put our kids into.
Yeah.
um and so, yeah, so we did Waldorf for our daughter through 8th grade. Sebastopol has two public Waldorf schools, so that's part of the reason we went there. So she went to a public Waldorf school, charter school in Sebastopol, K through 8. There's actually a public high school, but she was done with Waldorf. And and then and our son now, he's in a private Waldorf now, but
Yeah.
because they don't seem to have public Waldorf school in Brooklyn.
Right, right, right. Wow. Uh, yeah. So with the Waldorf program, right? You have at home you there's a task for you, right? Where you can't you're discouraged from having a lot of movies on or television or even like recorded music and things like that because it's all about generating it together as a family or otherwise letting the kid have an imagination like free imagination.
Yeah.
Was that at times difficult for you because you were like, oh, I really want to show my kid this record or this movie at some point?
I think, we we well, with Kaya, we were pretty strict. And then, but then when we'd go to family houses, she would get exposed to video and stuff. And during vacations, I think we'd sometimes watch videos. And as she got older and older, once she got like 7th, 8th grade, then she was probably seeing something like almost every weekend, or as terms of a video.
Mm-mm.
But we did not get her a phone until 8th grade graduation. And
Wow.
that was like, um it was just kind of a challenging, it was just kind of hard to hold. Like, she wanted it so badly, it was hard to hold as a line. But I don't think we have any regrets. I think, oh, these the phones are so powerful, and some of the impacts of this stuff is so negative that. And so I think we have the same basic approach with Loka. He gets a little. We watch a video almost every Friday and Saturday with him now
So
as a 6th grader.
mm-mm.
But we do. There is much less video and screen time, I think, than in other households, and it's something the class basically shares. There's always a spectrum of values within the class, and but it's sort of a commonly held value, and so it's sort of like, and you can see it, that it benefits their imagination,
Yeah.
and that when he does see something, it can take over his imagination for a week really quickly. Like, it's like Star Wars, and then like everything all the suddenly everything's about Star Wars for quite a while.
Yeah.
And and but then when that isn't there, all this stuff is happening. There's all this imaginative engagement,
Yeah.
and kind of having a value that, like, oh, like, the child's bored, and so don't try to go fix that. Let it's kind of that's the the medium through which, you go through boredom to get to imagination.
Right, right.
Just let that try to be patient with that boredom, and let them go through it and find some imagination, let them wake up to their own creative engagement.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I feel like boredom can be such a painful middle ground or something like that. As a kid and as an adult, especially, like finding time to be bored sounds like a very difficult undertaking or just not a worthwhile undertaking because there's so much I could get done or there's so much I can consume or there's so much I can have someone present to me in a recorded way or whatever it is. And yet the dividends of allowing yourself to tap into something that's back there processing is then you get to have made something, or you get to have like presented something to someone else. Um, and well, and on that note, for your own creative life, like from what I understand, you pursued a you pursued music as a student at some point, right?
Yeah, yeah, I was well, I went to MIT thinking I would do physics, and then I basically I did like physics once it became non-visualizable, which is
Oh,
like kind of for me like kind of like a lot of the quantum and the special relativity. I kind of enjoyed it, but it just became a lot of math and and not so tangible. And so and so then I was sort of moving towards music composition and psychology. And so that's where I ended. Those are the two main things I actually ended up studying at MIT. And with music, yeah, really focused on music composition. So did a lot of composition courses and study and practice, and also just did a lot of music with friends, not for not for school, but just for like bands like jazz and rock and alternative and weird and everything.
that's awesome. What so were you kind of doing a piano for that or a keyboard for that?
For
With
the
your
bands, I would do well for the kind of well for like the more jazz and blues, I would do piano. And then for the kind of more rock and alternative, I would do guitar. And
Whoa.
and and then I would do at school, I mostly actually did choir. Because I wasn't like concert level pianist. So I couldn't, I was good, but not that good. So the main ways I got my performing credits were through being on choirs.
Wow. Did you always feel like you were gonna have like a multi-instrumentalist element to your music expression, or did you kind of find yourself exploring like, oh, you know what, actually I'd like to try singing, or I'd like to try guitar or something like that?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a kind of, I think I kind of was super identified as a keyboardist and pianist because I took all these lessons, and then that's how I started improvising and creating music in high school. And and I wasn't particularly good at singing, and I didn't know any other instruments. But yeah, I just started picking up guitars and playing them in college. And then also I kind of was interested in the music I wanted to make with guitar. It was like less about, it wasn't about technical stuff at all. It was about, it was kind of like energy and 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 kind of more like a punk mentality.
Okay, yeah,
Like punk rock slash like alternative kind of like Sonic Youth kind of thing, like
yeah,
sticking screwdrivers in the guitar and like just like making a lot of noise
yeah, like
with
the
a
kind.
beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please, with a beat, yeah, must. They kind of like did that dissonance and that like no noise, that noise element. Did you find that the noise was like a very full, like a more of a liberated kind of sound to you, or was it more like the edge of it that drew
Hmm.
you?
I think I liked just that you could make things that didn't sound like anything else. I think I wanted to make stuff that didn't sound like anything else.
Wow.
And so I really like that. And I like combining things. So I like combining like a hip hop beat with like a really like kind of really out of control distorted guitar, and just and seeing what would happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Things like that. So I had a drum machine. Most of my bands in college, I had a drum machine, and then I would play guitar, and my best friend would play bass and keyboards and sax, and then we'd have a singer. We had a couple of different singers, and we went through a whole bunch of weird music that
uh,
we had fun.
yeah. Did you play like venues, or did you mostly just kind of jam at someone's
Just a
house? Or
tiny bit, just a
yeah,
tiny
yeah.
bit. And we played the battle. We won the battle of the bands. Actually,
Okay.
surprise to everyone's surprise.
That's awesome. Wow. And have you, I mean, it sounds like you've maintained at least a some uh expression or some kind of connection to music through piano at home and things like that. Having gone through so deeply your Buddhist path, now that you've kind of gone past the battle of the band stages, have you is the approach to music now a little bit different, or is it um, more so on pace with how you were exploring it before?
Um, I think it's gone through lots of changes, and uh and um once so a big phase was like at Tassajara, the request was, the kind of monastic rule was, don't listen or play music at all. And so I came to Tassajara from playing and listening to a lot of music. And so it was a big change. And it was kind of maybe a like a point of practice, or like a struggle and a point of practice for about a year. And and but in that year, I would say like but music kind of got liberated from being like instruments, or even from being like, so it got like the rustling of the leaves on the path and the sound of the wind in the trees, that could become music. But then even just like like tables and chairs could become music for me, or like a wall could just become music for me. And so that kind of is just very expansive, just like letting like the part of me that felt deprived of music was then getting filled with a much more open and spacious sense of music. And um and and so that, yeah, that was kind of really freeing. And
Yeah.
then I kind of, yeah, and then like it was kind of like years later, I kind of actually finding my way back to music. And well, Green Gulch is different. So Green Gulch doesn't have these kind of rule, and Green Gulch actually has a piano, and you could play this piano. Like there was an hour a day where people could play a piano. So I started playing that piano, and that kind of reawoke creative stuff. And I think actually I really love how open like you sit down, and almost anything could happen. And so sometimes I'd make really meditative music, like like music, like very very kind of like calm, and like coming from like meditative kind of spaces. But sometimes I would make kind of like really raucous music, and sometimes I'd make super dissonant music. And then once our daughter was born and she was kind of coming up, I started making more harmonic music, kind of music that would somehow kind of like, that I felt like, okay, this it's like avant-garde kind of dissonance was not going to be a good combination for the 5, 6, 7-year-old. So it's kind of like, and and sometimes there'd be like, when our we had so when our daughter was 3.5, we had my partner Sarah gave birth to our second daughter. She only lived for one day. She had various things happen just before she was born, and so she just couldn't live. And so Sarah and I were kind of went through a whole grief process, and actually making music was part of that for me. And although eventually I had to use headphones because it would make Kaya too sad.
Oh, wow. Oh, so you had to kind of
Yeah, I had to
uh,
use an electronic keyboard and just kind of keep it in the
keep it
headphones.
in. Wow.
But
Wow.
yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that element of your family story. And yeah, I did it feel like music for you was an outlet, or was it something that helped you process and helped you kind of get back into something?
I think with the grief process, it definitely was helping me like work with emotion and process emotion, and kind of, yeah, let emotion move,
Hmm, hmm.
let the grief process move.
Yeah.
And uh and a kind of on a kind of more, but aside from that kind of grief process, I just feel like, there's creative stuff needs to happen, like creative stuff needs to arise. And I think for chunks of my life, that was the only outlet that I could see was music. And
Wow.
now I feel like, actually, now especially like, giving talks actually is like, very, for me, very creative process. Like, because in Zen we don't have like there's no rules about like where you start. You can start with a koan, you could start with Dogen, or a sutra quote, or an idea, or nothing. You know, like there's no rule about how you start a Dharma talk and where it goes. And it could have like it could all be about one thing. It could be about five things. And so it to me, I experience it as a very creative process of working on a talk. And so that does actually mean that I don't need to make as much music, or like I can go weeks without playing piano now, and it doesn't feel like, but that creative part of me is still working and
Yeah.
finding its expression, and then but then if I'm not giving talks for a while, maybe I will start playing more music, or you know.
Yeah. But there's an underlying uh, not necessarily desire, but just kind of this like impulse to just to make something, whatever it is, or to see or to recognize just about every element of something that you can do as a creative act or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I feel like we are creative beings. I feel like, you know, it may, you know, not necessarily in the sense of like we're all making art, but I feel like part of our coming into our full liveliness is like is a creative of, you know, unfolding. And I feel like Zazen actually is actually a creative practice. And I feel this in Dogen actually. Um that I think sometimes there's a sense that like, well, in Zazen, like we cut through our thinking, and so that so maybe it doesn't feel like an imaginative space. But I actually feel like there's a lot of I actually feel like it's a creative, imaginative space. And but not in a way that's like happening through my involvement with my thinking. Like that's being I'm releasing my involvement with the thinking process is how that I'd be imaginative or creative, and then more like a kind of whole being, or kind of like letting it come up from the body and the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that you know, I'm relatively new to a Soto Zen practice, but it feels like Zazen is that becoming awakening. You're enacting awakening. It's not awakened, right? You're like awakening. So you're always kind of like moving into a new space, or moving into a new dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Of you know, you're uh, enacting a realization, and you're putting something together. And I totally you know, I can appreciate it on a theoretical level, and more or less I try to put that into a practice. But I definitely have you know, like when you take a shower and you start thinking about like a shower fight or whatever, like you're like thinking about like, oh, that guy that cut me off, or you know, whoever it is, that creative energy, if you want to call it that, shows up for their primetime slot in my mind a lot with for Zazen. So that there is this like, you know, the fantasy element that comes out of nowhere. I did not ask it to show up. In fact, I'm setting out time for myself to have a a reflective time on my breath, or a reflective time on my moment in that space. And I'm not asking for any particular fantasy, not asking for any particular memory, whether real or unreal. And so it can be a very deeply uh, almost mind-bogglingly confusing, or not confusing, but just mind-bogglingly creative time to sit zazen. It feels like.
Yeah.
Is that where you found the wall to be a musical element, or a
I
musical
think
instrument?
I think kind of like I think I was just allowing music. I was kind of really letting go of what is and what is not music. I think I was kind of working with a koan of like what is music. And then I kind of was like, I think I was doing yoga in this empty room, and I was just looking at this white wall, and then just this wall was singing to me.
Wow.
And so that was just like that was just that was, yeah, that was that creative moment. And
That's
yeah, and
amazing.
I kind of feel like yeah, I feel in terms of what you were saying, like, you know, for Dogen Soto Zen, that practice is a practice of awakening, or a practice of realization, and that like, and that how awakening becoming concrete, and that kind of like, and that this is always actually a creative event, like that, like there isn't a fixed way that awakening is manifesting through this person right now. It's an open living inquiry, and it's alive, and that, and it's inherently creative. It's not necessarily, yeah, like it's not necessarily an explicitly artistic creation. But it is like a creative event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that help you? I mean, just as someone that prepares for Dharma talks or prepares for teaching lessons or even playing music among family or friends or even uh, more established venues, does do you ever get nervous in this sense where you know in the same like creative people as they embark on their task, they have to publish it, they have to show it to somebody, that there's that audience element. Do you ever feel like this underlying creative element helps kind of you buoy any kind of scare or anxiety or anything like that as you go about, because it's all coming into being, it's all happening, so there's no real reason to fall into an anxiety? Or do you still kind of get the butterflies in your stomach and that's just part of the deal?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say that. Well, I would say like I can experience fear around giving a talk, and it's usually and maybe and also kind of like or doubt, about like how vulnerable do you want to show up? How vulnerable do you want to be in front of this group of people? And fear, and just like karmic fear of being judged negatively. And so usually actually as part of my practice, I'm trying to just befriend all my fear. I want to befriend my fear, and kind of, keep it, illuminated and close. And so I kind of feel like I'm not trying to kind of look for ways to kind of get rid of my fear. You can really just like, okay, like, welcome fear. Welcome dear old friend
Yeah.
who's with me all the time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my karmic predicament. And that feels that and I feel the overall trajectory of that is like freeing.
Yeah.
And um and then but I also kind of tend to look I kind of feel like, along with that fear are certain ideas of like, well, like, which I do kind of then massage, or that I'm working with. Like, for instance, like, if I'm offering a talk, the point of the talk is not what people will think of me, right? The whole reason I'm there is just to make a Dharma offering to encourage people's practice. And so, so I meditate on that. Like, I'm here just to make an offering. And, it's kind of like, this is my best offering. Take it or leave it, or use it or not. And kind of, and like, or what, uh yeah, and not, and kind of feel like, well, I actually feel like the real invitation is just to show up completely as the person we are, you know and 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 kind of like, I think the more fully we do that, the more we do actually invite each other into the moment and into practice.
Yeah, that you kind of have you allow yourself to have a deeper connection to an audience or to the piece itself or whatever it is, the more that you take that pressure off and recognize it as it's as something that is the best you as the best that you can do, or is the more you show up fully in the moment as yourself, the what else can you do? That's it.
Yeah.
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 I have a couple just reflections on that. One is that I like the Grateful Dead, and among many other uh, groups and all that. And one thing that I found out about Bob Weir, who has been doing guitar and singing and all that for the Grateful Dead for a long time, he still gets nervous.
Huh.
And this is someone that has played sold out shows for a long time and traveled all over the world and constantly touring, constantly on stage. I thought about doing the math on this, but I'd be curious if he's been on stage more longer than I've been alive. I think it like it could be. I mean, it's got to be years, right? It's got to be years that he's been on, because those are like 3.5 hour long shows. But the point is that he still gets nervous every time he stands on stage or he gets out of there. And I've heard this from other creatives elsewhere where you'd be nervous if you weren't nervous, because there's this
Mm.
element of care. Like, well, I want to care.
Yeah,
I need to be able
yeah.
to show up for it. And I used to do a lot of improvisational theater when I was in New York and a little bit in LA, and particularly improvised comedy. And you'd show up, walk onto stage with a few of your teammates or a good group of them into an audience that was in full expectation of you making something happen. And not just making something happen, but just making hopefully something that's funny. And I got used to that experience, and I'm not necessarily fearless, but I would get kind of I'd get excited about it, the opportunity to turn nothing into something.
Uh,
And I took the pressure off of myself with whenever I would show up on stage of well, it's got to be good. It's like, well, the more you try to do that, the more you're in your head and the more you're not listening. uh,
mm,
but the more that you show up and are true to what's happening on stage, the more successful usually it turns out. And if it doesn't turn out great, it doesn't turn out great. um, but yeah, so I can hear all that, and a lot of what you're saying resonates with me. But for some reason, making fear my friend is very difficult. I,
mm.
I've heard of that kind of phrasing before. I've tried to embody it myself, but it's it it just almost seems like it's an abrasive relationship. It's telling you actually not to be close. It's telling you to get far away from whatever you're doing. Why are
Yeah.
you doing it in the first place? So have you found some tricks, or have you found some, like, are there some examples of where you've done that for yourself? Where
Well, I guess I would say that like so when I'm befriending the fear, when I'm befriending my fear, or I kind of actually kind of want my intention when I sit is basically to befriend everything. And so kind of and I'll say words like welcome, and in my body I'm trying to feel, and I might you know I actually feel like the fear partially maybe it wants me to stop doing something. And so but I feel like, well, I can love this impulse that's trying to take care of me by thinking I shouldn't do this. And I kind of feel like, oh, and once the fear feels that appreciation, and like, oh yeah, you're listening to me. You're listening to me. But I'm like, you're not necessarily a source of good wisdom. So like I'm befriending these things. I'm not necessarily gonna act on them, but I'm gonna really become intimate with them and give them love, and that that kind of like giving love to everything we are is how we become whole. Giving love to everyone we meet is becoming whole. And uh and it kind of whereas like the alternative would be, like kind of being closed, I guess, or shutting off or pushing away or avoiding or denying or suppressing or acting out or venting. But to kind of and that kind of like the welcoming and befriending are kind of they're kind of bringing illumination, and they're kind of very respectful. Like, so there's a fear that's trying to take care of me. It has roots. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to respect this fear. I'm going to respect the roots of this fear. And that conditioning, respect all the conditioning. And that's a transformative conversation. That as this comes into illumination, the thing that's keeping the conditioning that's stuck by resistance can the whole thing can loosen with like basically awareness and the illumination of a welcoming, loving awareness.
yeah.
And so hate, overwhelm, stress, also grief, fear, excitement. Um, I think doubt. I mean, I kind of find this applicable to. I haven't found anything that it doesn't feel appropriate.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and does it feel like when you find the roots that the fear or the whatever condition that you're feeling feels like seen, and since you found the roots and since you're there with the roots, that there's like a, well, it's not just I'm not acting out of fear just because it's something to do. There's a reason why I'm scared of heights, or there's a reason why I'm fearful of this, and by doing that, you that listening element, it kind of tones down the volume of it or something like that.
Yeah, well, I think I think it can it I think there is this element of listening and giving love, and that kind of like a lot of my fear is actually like a projection of a kind of an old wound, like an old wound of basically you're not okay. And so and so and so that old wound needs attention, needs loving attention. Um and again, like not to be fixed, just to be kind of, welcome, welcome like old wound that
Wow.
isn't healing in the darkness, isn't healing when like it's like I put on this band-aids and bandages and as an attempt to deal with these pain, but it's like a festering wound. It's not healing down there. You need to kind
Yeah.
of put it into the light with real and really really welcome and befriend.
Yeah.
And and so then yeah, so that's definitely part of the process also. And I think sometimes I don't feel like I just feel like I'm just interested in an organic process, like just in a living process. I feel like sometimes it can get much more painful. The fear can like could be a really minor pain compared to like getting in touch with like a deep wound or a kind of a need. Like sometimes I could get in touch with a need for unconditional love and be like, "Ooh, that's really like splitting me in half. That's really deep."
Yeah.
And I just feel like, oh, the more fully I'm can be present with this without trying to fix it and change it, and without kind of a sense of bargaining. So I think sometimes it can be just like, well, I'll feel you and then you'll go away.
Right, right.
Like, no, I kind of like welcome forever,
Yeah.
welcome forever, because kind of like this stuff isn't going to go away in some ways, or it doesn't need to, like because once it's fully welcomed, it's just part of you, and it's like a resource, and it can help you meet people, and 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 it has it's some of it has there is information there, it's just like it doesn't need to be ignored. It's just like but it's just part of what's happening, part of the field. And so it's like, okay, this is all here now.
Yeah.
And just kind of really allowing this.
It's amazing. Yeah, I feel like that. I mean, that's a really helpful way of understanding it. Just for me as I kind of go about it, because yeah, it's not about fixing anything. It's not about or it's not helpful necessarily to have the expectation that it could be fixed. If it's welcome, then it's a guest, and if it's a guest, it can stay.
Yeah.
Um, and otherwise, if it's unacknowledged, it's living there, but it doesn't feel like it's ever been welcomed. So there's always going to be some sort of agitation. I recently read this. Are you familiar with the Daily Stoic? Do you know what the Daily Stoic is?
I think I've stumbled on the Daily Stoic once or twice.
Yeah, it's it's something that for the past few years now I've been reading as a newsletter. I just that's the level of engagement that I have with it. The main person behind it, I think Ryan Holiday, he writes books and there's a podcast and all sorts of different things. But what I get a lot out of is the newsletters. And one recently that came through was about how it's easy to get angry and it's much more difficult to recognize hurt. And
Yeah.
it did a lot for me just in the sense of understanding the emotional psychological impact of feeling hurt or being hurt by something or someone or whoever it is or whatever it is, where there's a stimuli, there's pain from that stimulus, and then it's so easy to be like, well, that person is no good, or get this thing off of me, or whatever it is. But uh, and it's easy to react like that because then you feel like you're going to shed it. However, the pain for some kind of interpersonal things remains, and the wound occurs, and to accept the wound for what it is as your primary reaction to the stimulus uh, helps you stop being helps you react in a more responsible way, I think, to a given occasion. Um, and I feel like there's some correlation, I think, to just kind of like seeing the hurt, being with the hurt, and not trying to mend it necessarily more than with just with that love that you're talking about.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, and I think sometimes I think there can be some forms of anger that are that can have a positive function. But I think if the anger is coming from um anger can be like, I'm not going to feel my pain and I'm going to get revenge. And then then it's like then that's just harm. But I think there can be kind of anger of like, there's injustice and something energetic is being called for. Um anyway, I feel like there's sometimes like an aggressive energy is skillful.
yeah,
And so I feel like yeah, I feel that there's a place for that. I want a place for that in our bodhisattva practice.
yeah, and I know we talked about this before, and I hope you feel comfortable talking about it now. But the your experience going to Harlem the other couple weeks ago, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing elements of that, because like you went up to hold space for protesters, and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we this was organized by some Dharma friends in New York City of to just we just went to a couple of days after the protests at Columbia and all the arrests and the kind of police raid on the building and kind of some violence. We just went to sit on the street right in front of Columbia, um, just to kind of be present with that place, you know, and with what had happened. And there was various like barricades set up, and we caught the attention of a guard, and the guard was kind of keeping an eye on us. I think they were a little wary. Um, and But we had a little altar set up, and we were all just sitting quietly, and then we maybe sat for like half an hour, and then we did like some chanting, and the guard was kind of like becoming more relaxed. And then towards the end, I think we all just kind of, it just felt this natural thing happened. We all just turned and bowed to the guard, and he seemed to smile, I think, and
Nice.
yeah, and it was kind of sweet and inclusive, and kind of like something human could happen there. And um, yeah, kind of, I mean, kind of like linking up to the conversation before, about fixing. I think the mentality of fixing is kind of a mentality of objectification, and that like, and that so when we do that to ourselves or to someone else, it's like kind of dehumanizing. Like when if I see my fear as a problem, I've kind of, or as something to fix, I've dehumanized this part of me. And and um and if I see this, if I see another person and their bias or their views or their attachment or their, as a thing to fix, then I'm not really relating to them as a human being. And and uh and I feel like the kind of, I kind of like this distinction, like Gabriel Marcel, he's a French existentialist philosopher. He distinguishes between like problems and mysteries. and so like kind of like shifting to a mystery, and kind of like, or kind of almost just like inquiry, or just like, oh, this is just like, this is just calling for my attention. I don't know. I don't know how what's gonna unfold, and it's not something. I mean, and you don't really fix mysteries.
Right, right, right.
And it's not necessarily a mystery to solve, but kind of, but a mystery to kind of live into and live with, and that the response to or with a mystery is like, it's this kind of unfolding, collaborative event. where it's kind of like you don't set the agenda,
Yeah.
or yeah, and there isn't like a fixed endpoint or goal. That's actually what's most interesting. What's most interesting is not something I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like with problems, there's like this almost binary where it's either fixed or it's not fixed, right? Or
Yeah.
remains a problem. Whereas
Yeah.
with mystery, the mystery that they're talking about isn't necessarily a solvable one. It's more just it almost inherently has to remain elusive, and it's like in a being with that elusiveness.
Yeah.
Because there are so many questions. So go ahead.
Or and that kind of an expansiveness to it, or or like or like I was talking about like roots, or that kind of like fear or hate or anger or pain. It's all happening in like an ecosystem, of this person, and then bigger ecosystems of human society. And so there's like there's so much relationality happening in many directions, and some of it, with long lineages and histories, that this is there's just so much happening, you know and so
Yeah.
it's like it's not going to be um solved.
Right. Right.
But to respond, but the more I can like be open to the complexity, the more actually responsible I can be, the more responsive, and I think the more skillful an offering I can actually make towards liberating suffering.
Do you feel like with the state of the world for sure, but also like just the state of America, where there's there's a perceived division, and there's a lot of fear around climate. There's a lot of fear around what November is going to look like with the election year. There's a lot of hate and animosity and vitriol swirling around everywhere. There's just like everyone, the people that are hunkering down on one opinion will not really budge to even really entertain the thought of another opinion in general. And do you feel like what we're talking about with kind of this treating with the expansiveness of the mystery is like, like how do you interpret like what's going on, and like how do you approach it with this sense of mystery, with the way that there is so much uh, active injustice going on, or there's so much on the news just kind of saying, speaking to the disruptions. Like, is that something that you kind of bring into your way of interpreting what's going on?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess my sense would be that um that the extreme views are kind of going to if either one side or the other, like, and that kind of and then digging in and taking a position, and making an identity out of that, and grasping um will uh perpetuate suffering and harm. And um and uh and to still I feel like I still want to take a stand on for the care of beings, but I want to figure out, how do I take a stand in a way that doesn't replicate structures and patterns of harm? And I kind of feel like there's not a lot of space for it right now. Like it's like the yeah the space around a lot of issues is so divided, um and it's like, and so either or, right? And then the either or, like, very reductive, and kind of making things into binaries, and and very dualistic binaries, yeah. So I'm kind of I want to find ways to interface with issues in ways that at the fundamental level aren't perpetuating the basic patterns of thinking, grasping, and delusion that are feeding greed, hate, and delusion even more strongly until they become acted out in massive systems of harm, which is
Yeah,
what I see in our country and in the world. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And does that kind of start with just doing your own work, doing like showing up to Zazen every day kind of thing for yourself, or does that start with having listening oriented conversations just among your family and
I
friends
think,
and people. And
yeah, I mean, I think wherever it can start and
right.
however it can start. And I think, sitting practice, I love sitting practice. I'm part of a community of people that feel some affinity to still sitting. I don't, it's not for everybody. So it's like, I feel like we need all kinds of modalities for being present and for finding ways to kind of really wake up. And so I just feel real openness about like, well, whatever the modality is, if it's moving, if it's chanting, if bowing, if it's sitting, it could be many things. And, or it could be all of those. Because we do have chanting and bowing and Zen, which I also love. But yeah, and 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 we need to be making efforts to change the structures of harm and systemic violence, and then also be working on our own hearts at the same time. And so I
Yeah.
kind of feel like we need to kind of uh I don't know if we need to really prioritize one or the other, just that we need it all.
Yeah.
We need it all happening as much as it can happen, or and every bit helps.
Right.
Every bit matters.
And everyone's coming at everything from a different angle or from a different, from a different condition. And so not everyone's able, uh not everyone's like inclined to approach something the same way as another person. So it can come from anywhere in any form. Well, that it's very encouraging to hear that there is this. I don't want to necessarily say that it's a third option, but in the either or kind of category, there's this more radical, radical in the sense of it's not the usual pointing finger approach. It's kind of this uh, trying to reduce harm and be there for this and advocate for balance and rights and all the things that are, and for a healthy climate and all those sorts of things. There is a way to do that
Yeah,
through um, through through this kind of mystery, which is
yeah,
really cool.
yeah.
Um, and as we kind of come to a close on this afternoon, I wanted to see, is there anything that you are interested in promoting or sending out into the world, to anyone listening, or any kind of like book that you are writing, or foundation or something that you want to support, any kind of thing that you'd want to share with somebody else?
Hmm. Hmm. Um, well, some of the books I'm really appreciating these days. Well, Zenju Earthlyn Manuel's all of her writings, and the writings of Paula Arai. And she's just come out with a new book called The Little Book of Zen Healing, just kind of like a kind of a maybe it's like a variation on a more kind of academic scholarly work called Bringing Zen Home. I think the healing art of Japanese Buddhist woman's ritual. Um, and but those are two authors that I really love, and love what they're offering for especially for Zen practitioners in the United States. And yeah,
I've been
and,
trying to approach the dishes and approach like just my general dad in the house activity with a lot of those bringing Zen home elements. And it's easier said than done, but there's a lot of inspiration to be had from a book like that.
yeah, yeah,
Um, Wonderful. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate you taking the time, and I hope to check in with you again soon.
great. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take good care.